This is The High Road with author and registered psychotherapist, Dr. Marlene Bizub. Dr. Marlene speaks to the heart of people who need to be lifted up and get out of the muck and mire that often accompanies major life changes, such as divorce or separation. Dr. Marlene will aspire to help parents of divorce to love their children more than they hate their ex and to learn to take the high road. So please welcome the host of The High Road, Dr. Marlene.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. This is The High Road, and I am Dr. Marlene. And George is with me today. So welcome, George.
Good morning in our time zone, Dr. Marlene. Great to be
Yes,
with you
for
again.
sure. Well, thank you. And I have to say that I shouldn't act like George is here when George is always here. But anyway, thank you for doing this with me. This is an endeavor that I am just passionate about. And I know this gets old because I say it every week, but it's true every week, or every time I say it, it's true. We have a topic that I am passionate about, like passionate. And I guess I'll just dive right in. It has to do with parenting plans, writing parenting plans, writing them so that you don't have to constantly or periodically or whatever go back to court. But before we go there, a closely related topic or issue that comes into play with writing parenting plans is the sibling relationship. So I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about the sibling relationship. And then, George, I'm going to let you jump in and give some thoughts about what I say.
All right.
And you have no idea what I'm about to say. So I have to tell people, I do this to you all the time, and it is so unfair, but you do a great job.
Thank you.
Yes. But first of all, people don't think about this. But the sibling relationship is the most enduring relationship one will have in their life. Now, why does that matter? And well, first of all, what do I mean by that? You're going to have that relationship longer than any other relationship because you're around the same age. So you're going to have that relationship longer than your relationship with your parents or your relationship with your children. But people don't really stop and think about the importance or relevance of a sibling relationship. And as someone who went through her parents' divorce and had siblings, it really is crucial, not only then, but I'm going to talk about now. Now that I'm in my 60s, and I hate to admit that, I hope people are saying, oh, no, you're not that old, are you? But anyway, it has particular relevance, which I'll talk about in a minute. But let me go back to my statement about this being the most enduring relationship you'll have in your life. Like I said, you'll have it longer than any other relationship. Now, saying it's the most enduring relationship you'll have does not mean that it's always the most endearing. Okay. I mean, I know we sometimes don't like our siblings very much. And some siblings even go through periods where they maybe don't talk or they're on the outs or whatever. And that did not happen to me. But what I wanted to share that did happen to me is two things. First of all, when we went through our parents' divorce, I had my siblings. That was my constant. Those were also the people who could relate on a firsthand basis to what I was going through right then. And the only people who could relate to what I was going through right then. Other people can relate to their experience going through something similar, but nobody can relate. And even amongst me and my siblings, we have to some degree different experiences. We might be more resilient. We might handle it better. We might go back and forth better than another, one of our siblings. All of that has to do with temperament of the child, one's resiliency, things like that. But let's fast forward to now. So during my child rearing years and those times in my life, and one of my sisters in particular, were 5 years apart. She was going through child rearing and all of that, careers and all of that. Well, now that we're both older, I hate to say I'm older, but I'm older, we text almost every day. And we used to not do that. And, we'd go weeks and not text or talk. Now, texting has certainly helped. Technology has helped to keep people in touch with one another. But as I said, we now have contact almost daily. I bring this up because this is why it's important to preserve the sibling relationship. A lot of parents bring up parenting time schedules that are not going to preserve the sibling relationship. In fact, if anything, they're going to damage it or even destroy it. And what I mean by that is you get parents who say, well, you take this child, I'll take that child. That's not going to go well. I can tell you right now, one child or maybe both are going to feel slighted by the other parent. Maybe one gets more from this parent than the other gets from the parent they're with. But again, you're separating children. It's bad enough that the parents are separated, but we don't need to separate children too. But putting them on different schedules, even if you don't go to the extreme of I'll take this one, you take that one, them being on different schedules can also cause sibling rivalry and resentment and competition. And I've gone on for, I don't know, 7 or 8 minutes here. I'm going to stop and let you talk. But I think you get the point that I'm trying to make. We've got to preserve the sibling relationship in designing parenting time plans.
Well, I think that's true, and I think the courts are particularly sensitive to that. My experience has been that judges are very unwilling to split up siblings. They want siblings to be together. I guess they recognize that the siblings will sometimes take comfort from each other. I
Mhm.
don't know if the judges have the recognition of the duration of the sibling relationship, but they certainly recognize the value of it in the present tense and are very reticent to split up siblings. So we don't see that very often. I think judges are particularly sensitive to that, and I have yet to see a recommendation from a mental health professional that encourages splitting siblings.
Right. You typically won't see it from us because we do recognize, because it's our field, we recognize the importance of the sibling relationship. We recognize what that does. Whereas if you're working with the parents, it might seem fair to the parents. Here's another one, year on, year off, for long distance parents. They're going to live 1 year with one parent and 1 year with the other parent. We don't do that. That as a rule. I'm not saying it's never happened, but as a rule, and you tell me if you agree, would you agree? We don't do that?
Very much so, and I really can't think of a case in my practice where the siblings were split.
Mm-mm.
It just is very, very rare and really requires, I guess, some sort of special circumstances for that to be recommended or to happen.
Yes, yes. And when people say, well, what's wrong with the year on, year off? The kids don't have any consistency, permanence, constancy, whatever you want to call it. So they've got friends here for a year, and then they go there, and they've got friends there for a year. And then they go back to the first place, and some of those friends are no longer their friends, like they've made their own friends while you've been gone for a year. And so, somebody who might have been your best friend now has another best friend and you're kind of left out. And so we don't want to do that to kids. Plus, just that constant change, getting used to not just friends, but the house, the environment, the school, the teachers, the neighborhood, the whatever. That's too much to have kids have to get used to again, all over again every year.
No, and I think it's more difficult for the kids in that circumstance to build social capital. It
Yes,
just doesn't happen correctly, or it's destroyed repeatedly. So it's got to be a very difficult and very unique situation for that to occur without damage.
right. And viewers who might not know what that is, I mean, it's kind of self explanatory, but they might not know what social capital is. But it's the constancy in relationships at church, at school, at your scout troop, on your basketball team, on whatever it may be that you're involved in, your dance class, your karate class, whatever. But it's, we joke about, but I'm dead serious. Some of our social friends are people who work at the grocery store that we go to every week, and we call them friends. We don't socialize with them outside of the grocery store, but they know us by name. That's part of social capital. When I walk in and they say, "Hey, Marlene, how are you?" That's social capital.
Yeah, and I think for children, it's particularly important. We want to see them develop relationships with children, other children that are healthy relationships. We don't want to see them move toward uh, gangbangers or any of this kind of thing. And to develop that social capital, to have them be what we used to call integrated, was is very important.
Yes, yeah, it is. It provides stability and constancy. And um, like I said, when I went through my parents' divorce, man, all that stuff really mattered. And if it wasn't for my siblings, it was my friends at school or a trusted adult. I had one teacher in particular that when I got to be a senior and was graduating, sent me a note and said, "I've watched you grow up and grow and learn and develop, and you're going to do great things." I don't know about that, but she believed in me. And those things are important. And if you're constantly going back and forth, and I know sometimes people can't help it. We're in a military community here, and people do come and go, and you can't help that. And those families tend to become very resilient, but some struggle with it. Some families or some individual children will struggle with it. And it's just not ideal. Does it have to happen sometimes? Yes. But if it doesn't have to happen, why would we want to make it happen?
Well, first of all, the teacher was right when she said you're going to do great things. And
Thank you.
so we'll start there. But
Thank you.
you're welcome, and it's true. And so I have no problem saying that whatsoever.
Oh, I appreciate that. I do. It's hard work that we do. That's for sure.
It really is, and I got tired really of dealing with angry and hurt people all the time.
Mhm.
So we have to take care of ourselves as well, doing this work, because there is a burnout factor.
Yes. And if we have time, we will come back to that and talk about that because that is really true. And we don't do enough of it. We don't think about it. We don't do it. And we have to be intentional. So maybe in the last segment, we'll come back and revisit that. That's a really good point that you bring up. Um, Getting back to parenting plans, though, I know there are desires of parents to not have to constantly go back to court or periodically go back to court. They don't want to go back at all. But if you have very young children, or even if they aren't very young, if they're going to have changing needs, which they are, unless they're all like teenagers. And even then, there's changing needs between a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old. But especially where there's really young children. And we often talk about the short, frequent schedule, which is short periods of time away from whichever parent is considered the primary caregiver, but frequent contact with both parents. So you might have a schedule where they aren't spending maybe any overnights with one parent, but they're seeing both parents 3 or 4 times a week for maybe 6 or 8 hours, might be less, might be more. But we go from that to almost the opposite extreme when they're teenagers of a week on, week off, which is very different. So how do we craft a plan? And my question is for you. I mean, you're the one who's going to have to answer this. And what considerations do we want to make when crafting a plan that will anticipate changes?
Well, we have to be careful because we can't oust the jurisdiction of the court with regard to children. The court will
Yes.
always retain authority over children, and so in our parenting plans, we can put in ideals, we can put in intentions. The parents intend to revisit this at a certain time and try to identify what is best for their children. But we can't say this is what is going to happen, and
Right,
the court has nothing to say about that. So
right.
the parents could enter into a parenting plan which says, gee, in 3 years or 5 years or 2 years, we're going to revisit this and potentially modify the parenting plan. It's those recitals are fine, but
Mhm.
saying this is going to happen, uh, and if the court then steps in and intervenes, if parents say, well, I felt that way then, but that's before I realized that he or she was such a jerk and I don't want to be bound by that any longer. The court would agree with that and revisit the situation from a fresh perspective, but we can't remove the jurisdiction of the court from child issues. The court is always going to retain jurisdiction over child-related issues. And so we have to be careful in crafting our parenting plans to
Mhm.
identify what are ideals and goals and aspirations and what are absolutes.
Yes, and that is such a good point because the way I always hear it explained or expressed is once you go through divorce, you have 3 parents. You have the mom, the dad, and the state. And that really is true. I mean, it really is true because they do retain jurisdiction over our children always until they're 18. But yes, they have to approve and sign off on whatever anticipated changes we're going to make. And I have seen courts say, I'm not going to order that now. I'll see you back here in a couple of years. Like when a child is, well, you know what? I've got several, I'm looking at the time, I've got several examples. And so I'm thinking that I'm going to stall here for half a minute and we'll pick this back up when we come back. But there are several examples I can think of where the court has said, based on these circumstances, based on this situation, based on whatever, we're not going to order that now, which is the point you're making. So we'll talk about that when we come back, but time for a quick break. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. Before we went to break, we were talking about things where we anticipate that a parenting plan is going to change, that the schedule is going to change. I'm going to throw out a couple of examples that I could think of right off the top of my head, and then let you comment on them, George, from the legal perspective. Because this really is a legal issue. I mean, we have to handle it in the legal realm and have a document that is legally sound or have an order. But two I can think of. One is figuring out where the child, if the parents are a ways apart, but in the same town or city, but they're far enough apart that the child's going to go to school in one area or the other, one neighborhood or the other. Often parents want to identify that when the child is 2 or 3. And a lot of things can change before a 2-year-old turns 5. And chances are, there's a good chance that one parent or the other or both are going to move. I mean, even within the same town, but move within the next 2 or 3 years. They have a new significant other, get remarried or whatever, or their job changes. And it no longer makes sense to live 20 or 30 minutes away from where you work. You know, things like that. But my experience has been the court will typically say, yes, when that 2-year-old turns 5, come back and we'll figure it out, because they've got to see what the circumstances are then. And the other one, before I turn it over to you, is long distance. If one's going to relocate and the children are going to spend the academic school year at one location and most of the summer at the other location, they often will not address that before it happens unless it's imminent, because again, they don't know what the circumstances, they being the court and the parents, don't know what the circumstances are going to be when that time comes. Who is going to live where, how old the child's going to be, how the child might feel about it, even though they don't have absolute say. If they're old enough, we let them have input. And so all those factors, like how much a parent might work at this new job, and might not be as available to the children as the other parent. So, anyway, my experience is with things like that, the court says you'll have to file a motion and come back to court, and we'll figure it out based on the circumstances then. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, and I think the courts are fairly flexible with parents agree. Then, from a legal perspective, we want to see a stipulation or agreement, and
Mhm.
that's filed with the court and adopted as an order of the court. And so the courts are fairly flexible if parents are in agreement on things. The courts will allow more latitude, more flexibility if parents are in agreement. When they're not in agreement, then that's a different story.
Mhm.
But if the parents are in agreement on their parenting plan or a modification of their parenting plan, typically the court is going to allow it unless there is something um, very extreme, like splitting siblings, where the court's going to intervene and say, I'm not okay with this. You're going to have to show up and explain to me why this is in the best interest of your children.
Mhm.
Um, but typically, there's a fair amount of flexibility if the parents are in agreement on a modification of a parenting plan.
Yes, unless it's, and you touched on this, but the word I always hear is if there's something the court considers to be unconscionable in the plan. And I did have that happen, so I'll share that. These parents, and I think I've talked about this on here before, but these parents had agreed that and I think it was 13-year-old could be alone and watch the 6 and 8-year-old overnight, and while one parent worked. And the parents both said it was okay, and the court said no, it's not. That was considered to be unconscionable, that you've got a child watching younger children overnight. And if there was an emergency in the middle of the night, what are they supposed to do? So things like that, would you agree the court's going to say no?
Yeah, absolutely. And if there's something that jumps off the page like that, the judge is typically going to reject that agreement or stipulation and say, hey, we need to have a hearing on this. I need a more complete picture. We might need an evaluation or a new evaluation,
Hmm.
uh, recommendations from a mental health professional on changes to be made. But I think one of the most difficult issues that you touched on briefly was relocation.
Yeah.
Relocation is a very difficult issue because typically one parent wants to take the children with him or her in the relocation, and the other parent is objecting to it. So those are very difficult, very trying, no pun intended, cases where there's relocation. And of course, in a military community, we have that fairly frequently.
Yes. Yes. And those are what I call win lose cases, because you can't do something that makes both parents happy usually. They both want to be the parent who has the children during the academic school year, because it represents a greater part of the year to have them for 9 months as opposed to three. And so somebody perceives that they are the winner and someone perceives they are the loser. They
Well,
usually
and
don't like the outcome. Uh-huh.
when you have a modification like that, or you have a situation where the time that the children spend with each parent is going to change, then you're typically going to have a change in child support. And the court
Yes.
wants to see that addressed as well in your agreement.
Yes. Well, and to that point, because I've had parents, I had one just this last week who said, I'm okay with just leaving the child support where it is, even though there's going to be a substantial change to parenting time. And I said, well, you better talk to your attorney about that, because I have also seen judges reject that. If it makes a big monetary difference in the amount of child support, I've had judges say, I'm glad that you agree, but I'm going to have to say no because that money belongs to the child. And
Hmm.
if you really don't need it for the day-to-day care of the child, put it in a college fund or something. But we're not going to just not have one parent pay child support because it's the child's.
Right. And so typically when there's a substantial change of parenting time, there's
Mhm,
going to be a change in child support. And the
mhm.
court wants to see that addressed as well. A judge is typically going to scrutinize the agreement for not only the time and the transportation, but also child support.
Yes, yes. That's been my experience too. And you're good at explaining why, because some of these things I've learned, but not being a legal expert, I can't really explain them. I just know it's the way it works. But yeah, were you going to
Yeah,
say something? Yeah.
yeah. The child support in our state anyway is based in part on the overnights
Mhm.
that the child spends with each parent. And so, unfortunately, parents are sometimes motivated to try to manipulate the child support by manipulating the number of overnights that they have. And it's kind of unfortunate. I'm not sure that we have a better system anywhere, but we hate to see that really, where a
Yeah.
parent is strictly motivated by the child support issue. It's unfortunate. It's not the paramount issue from the child's perspective, that's for sure.
Right. Right. But you find out real quickly what parents really want when you take that off the table. I mean, years ago when I started doing this kind of work, I had a parent come in and was okay with like an every other weekend type arrangement. And next time I talked to him, and it happened to be the father, next time I talked to him, said, no, I want 50-50. And I said, well, I thought you agreed you weren't as available during the week as the mom is and stuff like that. Well, what happened is he had discovered that it would affect the amount of child support that he paid. And so now he wants 50-50. So I have made a point, an intentional point of asking parents first before we ever talk about child support, unless they've already talked about it with their attorney. I say, what are you thinking for parenting time? What's realistic? What can you realistically exercise where you'll be there, you'll be available, and then when they find out about child support, I hold them to what they said they reasonably could do. And I don't let them do what that dad did.
Well, that's pretty sneaky, but it's a good approach.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have to know what's realistic. I mean, if you are a parent who isn't going to get home until 7 or 8 at night during the week because you work out of town or something like that, it does not make sense that you've got your kids with a babysitter that whole evening for that whole week or however long you have the kids when the other parent is sitting in their house available. If you ask your children, I would almost guarantee they would rather be with the other parent than with some other caregiver.
I think that's true. And parents, I'm not sure that they're comfortable admitting this, but being a single parent is a very tough job. Uh,
Yes.
Between work and parenting, it's a very tough job. And I think that a parent would welcome, although they may not want to admit it, would welcome a break from the
Yes.
amount of responsibility that they have. Um, and so sharing the children with the other parent is, I think, the ideal way to have that break from
Mhm.
being the responsibilities of being a single parent.
Absolutely. As a school year parent, I can tell you I was a much better parent in the fall when I'd had a summer break, and I love my son. But when I had had that summer break, I was a much better parent in the fall than in the spring, where I had been basically a single parent for 9 months and it was time for a break. I can attest to that. Something else I'll share that I've shared before, but as the school year parent, I want to challenge those parents out there who think that's the better deal, if you will, to have the school year and let the other parent have the summer. It, of course, depends on your circumstances. But in my case, my ex husband was self employed and he could spend all day, every day during the summer with my son. And he could shut down the business or leave someone else in charge early afternoon and go to, and this is what they did, go to the local swimming pool every day for a couple of hours and then come back before the supper rush. It was a restaurant. And they'd go between 2 and 4 when nobody's in there anyway, and then be back in time for the supper rush. And so they spent a lot more quality time together and recreational time, whereas I got all the responsibility parenting. I'm the one who took him to school, took him to appointments and activities after school, helped him get his homework done, made sure he got a bath and got to bed at a decent time. All of those things. And his dad had fun with him in the summer. So I just want to challenge people that you want to watch what you wish for because we all think that's a better deal. And I'm not sure it is.
Well, I often would ask a parent, do you believe that your spouse or your soon to be former spouse would harm your child or your
Mm.
children?
Hmm.
And typically they're going to fess up and say, no,
Right.
no, I don't believe that.
Right.
So sometimes we have to start from that perspective of, do you believe that your ex is going to harm your child in any way? And the answer is typically no.
Right. Right. More times than not, that's the truth. That's the answer you get, the honest answer that
Right.
you get. Mhm.
And we have to start sometimes from that basic outlook is, do you believe that your ex would harm your child? And we get a
Mhm.
no, and then we can move on from there. And it's a lot easier. It, I think, brings some realism to the circumstances for asking the parent, do you think your ex is going to harm your child? And they say no. And then I say, okay, well, let's move on from there. And
Yeah.
we start to construct a parenting plan.
Yes. Yes. And as the person who prepares the parenting plan for the court, describe a little bit what goes into a plan that does anticipate changes where maybe you don't have to go back to court.
Well, first of all, I think it's perfectly all right to have in a parenting plan that the parents are free to trade weekends or trade
Mm.
vacations and things like that. And those are relatively minor modifications that can occur on an ongoing basis, and that's not going to affect child support. We're
Okay.
not going to redo child support every time that a parent trades a weekend or something like that. So we'll put in there, we may cover transportation. We may cover the arrangements to be made for transportation, how soon in advance. We may cover payment for transportation. We will cover uh, schooling, extracurricular activities. We can cover travel. There are a number of things that we'll cover there. And as far as anticipating coming back, we can put in there anticipatory language. We agree to revisit this in 2 years or in uh, a certain point in the child's life, and that's fine. And the parents are there. Those are what we would call recitals.
Okay.
They're aspirational goals, and we can put that in the parenting plan. And at least it shows the court that the parents had the intention of reviewing that at a milestone point in the child's life.
Yes. Yes. Good points there. Good points. And I have a couple of questions, but it's time for another quick break. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. You know, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you're watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. George, I had a couple questions about what you were talking about. Are you able, with changing plans and anticipatory changes, are you able to, or do you recommend? And I don't know the answer to this. I truly don't. So you might tell me later, don't ever ask me a question like that again. But but do you, can you put something in there that we will revisit in 2 years, but unless something indicates otherwise, the plan will be to do XYZ? Can you do something like that, or do you just need to leave it open?
I think you can indicate that you intend to revisit the situation, but you can't bind people in the future to changes because we can't predict how those changes are going to manifest themselves.
Right. This goes back to what I said earlier about you have to see what the circumstances are at that time.
Right.
And
absolutely.
it may not, yeah. And it may not be where each of you lives or what your work hours are now. It might be how the child or children are responding and adjusting. And we have no way of predicting that.
No, and so typically, if the parents don't agree, we're probably looking at a new evaluation at that point.
Mm-hmm. And I think people don't realize how many thousands upon thousands of dollars they can rack up paying for all this stuff. Because as you and I both know, some parents just like to fight.
Well, and when we get a client who says, I want the children most of the time, and I don't want him or her to have the children any more than is absolutely required by the court, that's very sad. But we do get parents who that's their attitude. And to try to redirect that is sometimes quite a challenge.
Yes, it is. Plus, I think when you make those kind of statements, especially, God forbid, if you make them in court, That's very telling to the court.
Well, and it is, and it's statutorily mandated that the court has to consider the ability of each parent to encourage the sharing of love, affection, and contact with the child or the children.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's a criterion that the court is going to look at, and the more vehement a parent is about excluding the other parent, sometimes it
Mhm.
really backfires. It's really telling to the judge, hey, we're going to have an alienation type of issue here if I'm not careful in constructing my parenting plan.
Yes. Yes. Yep. And a lot of parents don't realize that that's in the best interest of the child statute, that it's one of the items that judges have to look at is each parent's ability to foster the sharing of love, attention, and contact. Is that what it is? Love, attention, and contact?
I think love, affection, and contact.
Affection. That's right. Love, affection. Oh, yes, of course. Okay. Love, affection, and contact between the children and the other parent. They don't realize they're being scrutinized on that item.
No, and so it really can backfire if a parent is adamant and vehement about wanting to exclude the other parent. That's a red flag, and the
Yeah.
court has to be very careful in constructing its order under those circumstances.
Right. Right. And you get that naive or short sighted parent who thinks when the judge says, so let me get this straight, you really don't think the other parent should see your children much at all. And that parent goes, that's right. They don't realize they just shot themselves in the foot.
Absolutely, big time.
Yes. Okay. I do want to have time for this. I don't know that it will require all the time we have remaining. But you brought up something earlier that I think is a really, really important point that all of us who do this kind of work overlook. And we did not anticipate talking about this today, but being a mental health provider, I can't help but want to address it since you brought it up. But that is taking care of ourselves when doing this kind of work. And that can look a variety of different ways and take on a variety of different looks, if you will. But it might be just taking time off, it might be getting a massage. Hopefully, it's not things like drinking, things like that, unhealthy ways to cope. But some other things are kind of our own support groups or professional consultation groups. I know a group of women attorneys, they just happen to be women. I don't think they intend to exclude men who meet on Fridays, I think every other week at happy hour, for just discussion about their cases and their work, but just have someone to bounce it off of and um, I guess, complain to because our spouses get tired of hearing us gripe about things. But anyway, what are other thoughts you have, or do you agree with those things that I mentioned of taking care of ourselves?
I think they're extremely important, and the potential for burnout in the work that we do is very high. So
Mm-hmm.
self-care is critical. It's helpful to know that you're not the only one going through the professional challenges that you face. It's helpful to know that others are sharing that experience, if you will. You have shared experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and you can relate to that. Vacations are critical. I think
Yes.
it's a real mistake not to take a break, a vacation. It doesn't have to be long or luxurious, but just a break from the grind of the everyday dealing with people who are angry.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I mean, this is going along with vacations or time off. Some of us are really bad about, and I probably shouldn't advertise this, but some of us are really bad about wanting to accommodate our clients. And so I find myself on a weekend frequently saying, yes, I'll see you on Saturday, and yes, I'll see you on Sunday. And at some point, I think we have to set boundaries and say, no, I've got to have Saturday off, but if you want to do Sunday, I'm a strong believer in needing a day off, honoring the Sabbath, if you will. I don't think it has to be Sunday. I think it can be Saturday or Friday or Monday or any other day. But I think there's a good message in there, and that is that we need time off. We need to take care of ourselves. And even if you see one client on Saturday and one on Sunday, you're not taking a full day to yourself. And it's my belief that a full day to yourself is important, where you don't have to get dressed and do makeup and all of that if you don't want to.
Yeah, the makeup part of it is really difficult for me, but I think
Right?
what your point is not wasted. It is critical to have some boundaries. Otherwise, it'll be a day and night, 7 days a week, that
Yeah.
people are in distress.
Yes. And our clients, for lack of a better way of putting it, are needy. They are needy at this particular time. And I'm sensitive to that. I get that. I mean, they truly are. I'm not dogging them. I'm saying they really are. But at some point, we have to take care of ourselves too.
Yeah, there's no question about it. We can't help others if we can't help ourselves.
Oh, amen. That's a mic drop right there. We can't help others if we can't help ourselves. But it's so true. Any final thought there?
Oh, I think it's critical, and really we are come back to the table, come back to the issue fresh, and ready to work and ready to help people if we take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. Well said, George. Well, it's time to end again. I hate to, but we got to go. This is Dr. Marlene and George, and you've been watching The High Road on the Dr. Marlene YouTube channel. We'll see you next week.
Tune in to The High Road with host Dr. Marlene and gain insight into how to rise above tough circumstances and learn the skills that will help you take the high road in your life, no matter what challenges might come your way, on the next episode of The High Road.